will see an example of motion analysis. Motion analysis is an activity with which we first introduce students to a debate topic. Motion is just debate jargon for the debate theme, debate proposition, debate question. And analysis, of course, means breaking it down, establishing key concepts, establishing key contexts in which it is taking place, identifying potential circumstances that might change the relevancy or perhaps even the substance of the debate, etc. You will see that the activity should be as interactive as possible. This, of course, depends on how well the students are acquainted with a certain topic, but the idea is that the students should be leading as much as possible the train of thought, if you will. Of course, as I said, this heavily depends, but what this means is that while you should have a preparation of certain things that have to be said, you should not be engaging in a frontal sort of teaching style, but rather should be trying to, achieve interactivity as much as possible. Again, this will depend on the particular situation. Hopefully, more will be clear after watching this video. So we can start. The topic for today's session is the concept of civil conscription. So have you ever heard of civil conscription?
Maybe, not really.
Okay, maybe. Why do you mean maybe?
I feel like I've heard about it somewhere online.
Okay, and what do you think it means?
Well, conscription is the ability that you're forced to go to the army. Civil probably means that you're not forced to go to the army, but somewhere else.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. So civil conscription, the basic concept is that the state forces you to, as you said, go somewhere, but as opposed to usual military conscription, where you go to the armed forces for some amount of time to serve there and train, you help the government, the state, in other areas, usually but not limited to building infrastructure, helping in, for instance, kindergartens. This is something that was popular. Basically doing and working in any sort of capacity that qualifies as civil service. Usually this would mean younger people, and usually these would be jobs that do not require a particular education, which is why help at the kindergarten or physical labor, building a road for instance, was historically popular. A local example, at least for our geographical area, would be how after the Second World War, Yugoslavia used this concept to build a lot of the infrastructure. For instance, if I'm not mistaken, the highway between Zagreb and Belgrade was built in such a way. To the question today, so the debate topic that we are going to be analyzing is, we believe that the state is principally allowed to use civil conscription. We could also use a similar wording. The question basically is the use of civil conscription legitimate? And we are gonna start by just analyzing this motion. So if we start by focusing on specific words in the motion, specific concepts that are important, what do we have to pay special attention to?
I mean, probably in the state, who exactly will actually do this, put this
Okay,
into
so
motion?
we need to talk about the state, and what exactly is the process that leads to civil conscription being enacted, who decides who does what, when, why, how, etc. What else?
Um, the people, what they want.
Okay, the will of the that's always an interesting question in regards to political opinion, political philosophy. Pardon me. So, how is the opinion, the public opinion, how does it factor in making choices legitimate? For instance, would be conscription more legitimate if the majority supported it? Or maybe maybe it does not matter. Okay, what else?
Individual freedoms. Probably.
Okay, so individual freedom. So the question of I mean, okay, I guess the debate is about individual freedom, right? The question, the whole debate. One of the big questions here is in what relation is individual freedom to different, perhaps, rights of the state or duties of the individual. I would say that also civil conscription is important. What is important about civil conscription? What is an important, perhaps, context?
Maybe whether the country actually needs help, like if there's a shortage of some workers or something, or if
Okay.
it's just to...
Yeah, okay, this is an important perhaps thing to look into, because I guess the difference would be that maybe in extraordinary times, maybe this can be justified, but maybe not in any regular sort of situation. What else could be a big factor? So maybe just to give you a hint, maybe the intensity of work, because there's probably a big difference between saying, okay, you have to help the state by doing stuff like being a assistant teacher in kindergarten or something like that, as opposed to back-breaking labor in a mine, right? I mean, like, so obviously there are arguments where you can generalize everything, but probably if we're discussing spectrums, and probably this is something that's also important. Okay, let's now try to go discuss. So we have mentioned 4 concepts. Let's try go through them one by one. So we had the state, the people as the masses, the nation, das Volk, if you will, the individual, and then we had in the end, the actual work that needs to be done. So the civil conscription part of it. Okay, let's talk about the state. Now, what do we need to characterize about the state? What can be different about our... So, again, there are arguments that are universal. For instance, if we take a more libertarian approach, we can say no matter what the state looks like, this is illegitimate. However, even though such arguments exist, let us try to discuss different parameters that might be important. So what could be important about the state and about which would influence maybe the legitimacy of such an action?
How democratic it is.
Okay, so how democratic it is? This is already, if we talk about how democratic it is, this already includes an assumption that the government gains legitimacy from democracy, which is not an unfair assumption. In fact, it is very commonly accepted in the modern world. But I just want to do a footnote here that there are many authors in political philosophy who were not as I would say, excited about democracy as we know it. For instance, just to mention Hegel, always a big name, especially in these times. You can he would explicitly say that that democracy does not matter in such a way. To simplify it drastically, because the design of society should be rational and should be informed by reason, and not by as Hegel would say, I believe, arbitrary nature of counting votes for this and that. But okay, so how democratic it is? I think we could maybe change this question into what is the decision-making process? And yes, this probably then can change a lot, right? Was it reached through an informed, rational decision? Was it reached through a democratic process, or was it a tyrant who, by decree, decided that something arbitrary needs to be built? I do not want to simplify history, but if you think about Egypt and the way the public works were enacted in Egypt, and then you compare that to maybe some other types of government, you can maybe imagine why this would be important. Note though that Egypt is, I think, far more complex than it seems. Okay, what else is important about the state? So we said, I think the one we covered is pretty important. We also said that the circumstance is important. What are some different circumstances in which this could be, different, like the legitimacy?
I mean, as I said, I guess it's just normal life happening. It's, I guess, less legitimate than if there are crisis times and there's a shortage of workers in general, and
I also do agree that this is something that might be important. Is there anything else? If not, we're going to move on. The important thing is that we try to think of as many characteristics of the discussion, even if we maybe, think of additional ones in the future. So, any other parameters about the state? Okay. Yeah, I would say so. The first one, the whole question of, how are decisions made? This is, we have to recognize, incredibly wide. So this basically includes, you could say that the government is defined by the process of decision making, and therefore, if we say, well, it matters how decisions are made, we could say that basically we defined the whole sphere of government by that. So having spoken about the state, let's now talk about the will of the people. What would you say matters most about the public opinion?
I guess how it's formed, firstly, is it elected, is it based on norms, is it based on something else, what they see in the media, what they,
Okay, I would say here, I agree. I think so. The philosophical way, so the classic way to frame this problem would probably be to say, and I hope I understood you correctly, is that public opinion can either, and this is one view, be formed randomly, as a collection of random factors that are arbitrary, or it can be, and this is a more optimistic, idealistic way of looking at it, through public discourse, application of reason, and through this application of reason, you can have, universality of a
Free
decision.
market of ideas.
The market of ideas, the marketplace of ideas.
The marketplace.
Free market, yeah. Okay, this is one of those most optimistic views on public opinion. And just a historical sort of note here. Especially the period of enlightenment produced a lot of thinkers who valued reason, and a lot of them, many of them, also valued the public nature of reason. So that reason is not just something that a philosopher access, like, you know, you could, for instance, think with Plato, you know, that thinking and deciding is something that is reserved for a specific class, but rather that everyone can engage in a reasonable discussion. Okay, so this is one problem here. Let's go to towards the question of the individual. What is important when it comes to the individual?
How much they owe to the society, to the state.
Okay, and what are the views here? What can we say?
It's probably either that you owe it because you owe a lot to the society because it raised you.
Mm-hmm.
Socrates comes to mind. Or,
Okay, yeah.
That you don't owe it to society because either you don't have much of a choice to not live in a society, but also because you didn't choose to be born.
Okay, well, so let's just slowly expand this. What do you mean that you did not choose to be born?
Well, I was never asked before I was born
Mhm.
if I want to be born.
Yes, and this is
Interesting.
yeah, this is I mean, yeah, no, but it is a bit abstract and maybe also a bit funny to think about, you know, being asked before you were born, but from a contractual sort of view, you can say, well, yes, but at the same rate, having a duty towards the society is funny, right? Because you say such a duty would be established if I had the chance to choose entering it, and because it's reasonable that I cannot exit it now, that, you know, I was already born, you know, that this is.
It's also the debate whether we owe our parents
Yes.
everything because they birthed us, they gave us life, they gave us a roof over our head, or if we owe them nothing because they chose to give birth to us, to, you know, raise us. Because
And this is and actually there is, I think, quite a classic way to, you know, to connect those two debates, which is the classic quote that, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and it's exactly so. This is why, you know, there's the very same. I mean, okay, there are specifics, but analogous maybe.
Yeah, but also,
Yeah.
if you want analogies, you can just use Socrates' analogy in which he just like expanded the nuclear family, and was just like, okay, so like you first have a family, and you have a village, and just like a bigger family, the village is a bigger family, and like the state is a bigger village, and that's basically it.
That is true. I would say that that here we could be a bit careful just based on different societal structures, because maybe in some structures the connection between a family and the rest of the society is less you know, continuous and more discrete, but these are already specific, so I agree. Okay, so that's the big question with the individual. If not anything else, I would now go to the question of civil conscription, and actually what kind of work do we expect? What do we expect to happen? What kind of work? Who chooses, etc. What do you think is most important here?
I mean, I guess if we're taking the concept that we owe it to the state, and that's why civil conscription exists, it would be unpaid work in, you know, the way we see it today, because you I don't know, go to your job for 8 hours every day for however many days you need, and then you get like a paycheck at the end of the month or in the middle of the month. And with this, it would just be you paying back to society because it gave something to you, that something being, I don't know, whatever it is, and you have to, for example, do physical labor in, you know, to
Mhm.
give back to society.
Okay.
So the question is, would the work be paid or would the work be unpaid? And you know how we talk
Mhm.
about work.
Yeah. That's the first I think important issue. Anything else?
The suitability of an individual to work in specific fields.
Okay. And what does that mean?
If I am very weak and have asthma, I'm probably not going to be able to build roads.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm forced to build roads, I'm going to have a very bad time.
To say the least, yeah.
That's true. So basically the question here is the actual work chosen, and do you have to do what you have to do, or and that's the opposing view, and not opposing view, the alternative is the work, you know, like maybe you just have a duty and you can choose how to fulfill it by choosing something that you can do. Okay, is there anything else? Otherwise we can start preparing the arguments.
Nothing.
Okay, and then we can take a short break and start working on the arguments.